the vast tapestry of the known universe, where 10,000 worlds turn beneath ancient suns, there exists a place where ocean meets sky in perfect harmony. Here, where warm currents whisper against volcanic shores and the air carries the salt-sweet promise of rain, one noble house has held dominion for 6 centuries. This is Caladan, jewel of the ocean worlds, where the Atreides hawk has soared for 20 generations. Before the desert winds would call them to destiny, before the spice and sand of Arrakis would test every bond of loyalty and honor, there was this, the measured cadence of waves against stone, the steady governance of a house that understood power as stewardship, duty as privilege. We gather now to witness the final days of an era when Duke Leto Atreides received the Emperor's command to abandon the world his bloodline had cherished and accept a fief on distant Arrakis. Full knowledge of what unfolds within this scope of departure and arrival shall be revealed, though the tale stops at the threshold of greater trials yet to come. In the 10,191st year after the founding of the Spacing Guild, when Shaddam IV held the Golden Lion throne as 81st Padishah Emperor of his line, the great mechanisms of imperial politics moved with the weight of millennia. 3 powers held the universe in careful balance: the Emperor and his terrible Sardaukar legions, the Spacing Guild, whose navigators alone could guide ships between the stars, and the Landsraad, that great assembly of noble houses whose ancient privileges checked even imperial will. Within this triangle of force, the Shome Company, that vast commercial combine, distributed the wealth of worlds according to directorship shares and voting strength. Here lay the true measure of political power, not in the pageantry of throne rooms, but in the quiet manipulation of trade routes and spice quotas, melange futures and transport monopolies. House Atreides of Caladan stood as a duke among dukes, holder of a Ciridar fief that had known no other masters for 20 generations. Duke Leto, called the Red Duke for his banner's crimson hawk, commanded respect among his peers in the Landsraad. This very popularity, Master of Assassins Thufir Hawat often warned, aroused the jealousy of the powerful. A popular man became dangerous to those who ruled through fear rather than loyalty. The governance of Caladan reflected principles as old as the Atreides bloodline itself. Where other houses extracted wealth through harsh taxation and forced levies, Duke Leto understood that a world's true strength grew from the willing service of its people. The ocean planet's fisheries provided abundant protein for export. Its kelp forests yielded pharmaceutical compounds prized throughout the Imperium. Its small but skilled population maintained manufacturing centers that produced goods of exceptional quality. Revenue flowed to the ducal coffers not as tribute wrung from unwilling hands, but as the natural harvest of prosperity shared between ruler and ruled. The duke's tithe remained modest by imperial standards, enough to fulfill obligations to the emperor and maintain his place in Shome, but never so burdensome as to crush the spirit of enterprise among his people. Caladan's merchants sailed their trimaran dhows across warm seas with confidence, knowing that their duke's protection followed them to every port. The administrative apparatus of Atreides governance remained deliberately small, personal, efficient. Unlike the vast bureaucracies that strangled initiative on other worlds, Caladan's government operated through direct relationships between the Duke and his appointed representatives. Each coastal city, each fishing consortium, each manufacturing guild knew they could petition their ruler directly. Justice flowed swiftly when required. Mercy tempered every judgment, and the Duke's word, once given, remained as fixed as the tides. This philosophy extended to military organization. The Atreides forces, though smaller than the armies some great houses maintained, earned reputation throughout the Imperium for discipline and effectiveness. They fought not as conscripts driven by fear, but as men who chose to serve a house they respected. Their equipment might lack the ostentation favored by wealthier powers, but their training surpassed that of any save the Emperor's own Sardaukar. The ceremonies of House Atreides spoke to ancient values made manifest in every formal gathering. When the Duke held court in the great hall of Castle Caladan, banners of green and black displayed the red hawk with wings spread wide, a symbol chosen not for its predatory nature, but for its keen sight and protective instincts. The Atreides hawk watched over its territory with unwavering vigilance, striking only when its domain faced genuine threat. Livery worn by household guards reflected this same philosophy. Their uniforms bore the red hawk crest at the breast, but the black working fabric spoke of function over display. These were men who valued substance above appearance, whose allegiance extended beyond mere employment to something approaching kinship. When they offered their salute, a crisp gesture bringing the right hand to the hawk crest, they honored not just a duke, but a tradition of leadership earned through 6 centuries of faithful stewardship. Formal receptions at Castle Caladan maintained the dignity befitting a great house, while avoiding the oppressive grandeur that characterized courts on richer worlds. Guests found themselves welcomed with genuine warmth rather than calculated display. The Duke's table offered the finest delicacies Caladan's seas could provide, served with wines from the planet's southern vineyards, but the emphasis remained always on discourse and fellowship rather than mere consumption. These ceremonies expressed in tangible form the Atreides' understanding that true nobility arose from restraint wedded to duty, that power's highest expression lay not in domination, but in protection freely offered and gratefully received. At the heart of House Atreides stood Duke Leto himself, a man whose leadership style embodied the principles his bloodline had refined across generations. Tall and dark-skinned, with eyes that held wood-smoke grey and a face marked by sharp angles and planes, the Duke carried himself with the quiet confidence of one who had never needed to prove his authority through bluster or display. His governance flowed from deep conviction that leadership meant service, that a duke's first obligation ran not to his own aggrandizement, but to the welfare of those who trusted him with power. The Duke's approach to decision-making revealed this philosophy in action. He gathered information from multiple sources, weighed options with the care of a mentat, but never forgot that behind every policy choice lay human consequences. When Caladan's fishing fleets faced unprecedented storms one season, threatening economic disaster for coastal communities, Leto opened the ducal reserves without hesitation, ensuring no family faced starvation while the seas recovered. Such decisions earned him loyalty that no amount of fear could duplicate. Beside the Duke stood Lady Jessica, whose influence within the household operated through channels both subtle and profound. A graduate of the Valach 9th Bene Gesserit school, she brought to her role as the Duke's formal concubine skills that transcended the political advantages of her union. Her training in the sisterhood's ancient arts, observation techniques that missed no detail of human behavior, voice modulation that could command or persuade as circumstances required, physical conditioning that kept her mind sharp and body capable, served House Atreides in ways that extended far beyond formal diplomacy. Jessica's quiet statecraft proved invaluable during the complex negotiations that preceded the Arrakis assignment. While Duke Leto managed the public aspects of imperial politics, she worked through networks of wives, concubines, and courtiers, to gather intelligence that might prove crucial to their family's survival. Her Bene Gesserit contacts provided insights into the deeper currents moving beneath the surface of official pronouncements. Yet always she balanced these obligations against her genuine devotion to Leto and their son. Paul Atreides, heir to the ducal throne at 15 years, received an education designed to prepare him for the burdens he would one day inherit. His days began before dawn with physical conditioning, not the ceremonial swordplay favored by some noble houses, but genuine combat training that might one day preserve his life. Duncan Idaho, the swordmaster of the Jinnahs, drilled him in blade work with an intensity that left no room for adolescent pride. Each session demanded total concentration, perfect form, absolute commitment to excellence. Mentat training occupied much of Paul's academic schedule. Under Thufir Hawat's demanding tutelage, he learned to process information with the mechanical precision of a human computer, to see patterns within chaos, to project probable outcomes from limited data. The exercises strained his mind to its limits, memorizing vast tables of planetary production figures, calculating the political ramifications of trade agreement modifications, analyzing historical precedents for current diplomatic challenges. Hawat demanded not just accuracy but speed, not merely understanding, but intuitive grasp of complex relationships. Language studies ensured Paul could communicate with subjects throughout the Imperium. He mastered not only the formal imperial tongues required for court protocol, but regional dialects that would allow him to speak directly with common folk without translation. Dr. Yue supervised much of this linguistic training, drawing from his vast knowledge of cultural nuances to provide context that mere vocabulary could never convey. Thufir Hawat, the master of assassins whose service to House Atreides spanned 3 generations, embodied the perfect fusion of intellectual capability and martial excellence. As a mentat of the first rank, his mind operated with the cold efficiency of a human computer, processing information, calculating probabilities, projecting the consequences of strategic choices with uncanny accuracy. His wrinkled face bore the carmine stain of sappho juice that enhanced mentat performance, while his rheumy brown eyes missed nothing of significance in any situation he observed. Hawat's responsibilities extended far beyond the conventional role of a security chief. He maintained networks of agents throughout the Imperium, gathering intelligence that might affect House Atreides' interests. His analyses of political trends, economic developments, and military preparations provided Duke Leto with the information necessary for informed decision-making. When crisis threatened, Hawat's strategic recommendations carried the weight of decades spent studying the art of survival in a universe where houses rose and fell according to their ability to anticipate and counter their enemies' moves. Duncan Idaho brought to his role as swordmaster skills that extended beyond mere martial prowess. His training at the Jinnahs school had produced not just a weapons expert, but a tactical genius capable of adapting ancient techniques to modern threats. His dark, round face rarely betrayed emotion, but those who sparred with him learned to respect the lightning reflexes and absolute precision of his blade work. Idaho's loyalty to House Atreides ran deeper than mere professional obligation. He had found in Duke Leto a leader worthy of the total commitment his warrior's code demanded. The swordmaster's duties included personal protection for the ducal family, but also the training of household guards in advanced combat techniques. Idaho believed that every man who wore the Atreides hawk should be capable of defending not just his own life, but the lives of innocents who depended on their protection. His training methods pushed men to their absolute limits, but those who survived his instruction emerged as fighters who could stand against any threat the universe might present. Gurney Halleck, the troubadour warrior who served as war master, represented a unique blend of artistic sensibility and deadly skill. His lumpy, scarred face bore the mark of an inkvine whip from his years in Harkonnen slave pits, a reminder of the price of failure in the game of great house politics. Yet this harsh experience had not destroyed his capacity for beauty. His long fingers could draw music from a 9-string balisé with the same dexterity they employed when wielding a blade. The scar across his jawline seemed to move with a life of its own when he smiled, which he did often despite the grimness of his responsibilities. Halleck's military philosophy emphasized adaptability and morale above rigid doctrine. He understood that battles were won by men willing to die for something greater than themselves, not by superior numbers or fancier equipment. His training sessions combined practical weapons instruction with lessons in the emotional bonds that held fighting units together under extreme stress. When his men heard him quote from the Orange Catholic Bible or sing ancient ballads around evening fires, they recognized in him not just a commander, but a keeper of the values that made their sacrifices meaningful. Dr. Wellington Yue completed the inner circle as the Duke's personal physician, a man whose Suck School conditioning guaranteed his absolute reliability in matters of medical ethics. The diamond tattoo of imperial conditioning on his forehead marked him as one who could not, by the deepest psychological compulsions, bring harm to those he served. His stick-thin figure, draped in wrinkled black clothing, made him appear almost fragile, but his medical knowledge encompassed healing arts that could preserve life under the most desperate circumstances. Yue's responsibilities extended beyond mere medical care to include the education of Paul in subjects that would prepare him for leadership among peoples throughout the Imperium. His vast learning encompassed not just anatomical science and pharmaceutical applications, but philosophy, history, and the subtle understanding of how different cultures approached fundamental questions of existence. When he spoke of the mystery of life, he referred not to some romantic notion, but to the practical challenge of maintaining health and sanity in a universe that tested both through constant trial. The ancient feud between House Atreides and House Harkonnen had crystallized into formal canly, that ritualized form of vendetta conducted according to the strictest limitations of the Great Convention. This was no mere personal animosity, but an institutional conflict rooted in historical grievances that stretched back generations. The rules governing such formal enmity protected innocent bystanders while allowing the principals to pursue their legitimate claims through methods ranging from economic competition to carefully regulated violence. Canley provided a safety valve for tensions that might otherwise explode into the kind of general warfare that could destroy entire planetary populations. Under its provisions, House Atreides and House Harkonnen could strike at each other through accepted channels, sabotage of shipping, subversion of trade relationships, even assassination attempts, while knowing that certain boundaries could not be crossed without triggering intervention by the Landsraad High Council and the Emperor himself. The system demanded a peculiar form of honor among enemies. They might seek each other's destruction, but only through means that preserved the larger structure of imperial civilization. For House Atreides, this formal enmity carried special weight because of their philosophical differences with the Harkonnen approach to governance. Where the Atreides built loyalty through just treatment and shared prosperity, the Harkonnens maintained control through fear, brutality, and the systematic exploitation of their subjects. These contrasting styles made compromise impossible. One vision of noble responsibility must ultimately prevail over the other. The Arrakis' assignment would provide the arena where this fundamental conflict would reach its resolution. The broader context of the Landsraad provided the framework within which such rivalries operated. This great assembly of noble houses served as both parliament and court of last resort for disputes that might otherwise fragment the Imperium into warring factions. Through complex negotiations involving showm directorships, trade agreements, and marriage alliances, the great houses maintained a balance of power that prevented any single faction from achieving dominance. Duke Leto's popularity within this assembly made him a figure to be reckoned with, but also marked him as a potential threat to those who preferred a more compliant political environment. The imperial decree that transferred the Arrakis fief from House Harkonnen to House Atreides arrived wrapped in language that concealed its true nature beneath formal courtesy. Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV presented the assignment as recognition of Duke Leto's exceptional capabilities, a reward for loyal service that elevated House Atreides to stewardship of the universe's sole source of the spice melange. The document bore all the proper seals, followed established protocols for fief transfer, and included provisions that appeared to protect the Duke's legitimate interests. Yet those familiar with imperial politics recognized the assignment for what it truly represented: a trap designed to eliminate a popular leader whose influence threatened the Emperor's control over the Landsraad. Arrakis, known throughout the Imperium as Dune, the desert planet, held strategic importance that extended far beyond its harsh beauty. Here alone in all the known universe grew the spice melange, that mysterious substance without which interstellar civilization would collapse. The Spacing Guild's navigators required spice to achieve the limited prescience necessary for guiding ships through folded space. The Bene Gesserit used it in their training rituals. The wealthy throughout the Imperium consumed it for its life-extending properties. Control of Arrakis meant control of the most valuable commodity in human space. The transition from quasi-fief to fief complete carried enormous financial implications. Under the previous arrangement, House Harkonnen had operated Arrakis under showm company contract, sharing profits but accepting limitations on their direct authority. The new grant gave House Atreides complete administrative control, along with the right to exploit spice resources without external interference. This apparent generosity came with corresponding obligations. The Duke must maintain production quotas, ensure uninterrupted spice flow to Guild and other Imperial customers, and absorb all costs of planetary administration from his own resources. The logistics of transferring an entire noble household across interstellar distances required months of careful preparation. Guild highliners, those vast ships that moved between star systems like mobile space stations, could transport people and cargo efficiently, but their services came at enormous cost. Every piece of furniture, every family heirloom, every essential piece of equipment must be evaluated for its necessity. Weight restrictions meant that much of what had filled Castle Caladan for generations would have to remain behind, abandoned to whatever fate awaited a planetary residence whose masters would never return. Personnel decisions proved equally complex. Some members of the household staff could not be expected to abandon Caladan for life on a desert world whose harsh environment offered none of the comforts they had known. Others, bound by loyalty or practical necessity, would accompany their duke wherever duty demanded. The duke's military forces faced particular challenges. Volunteers could follow him to Arrakis, but conscripts remained free to seek service elsewhere. This provision ostensibly protective of individual rights, threatened to strip House Atreides of experienced personnel at the moment when they would face their greatest challenges. Cadre assignments reflected the Duke's understanding that success on Arrakis would depend not just on administrative efficiency, but on the personal bonds that held his inner circle together. Thufir Hawat would establish intelligence networks in the new environment while maintaining his role as strategic advisor. Duncan Idaho would oversee security arrangements while exploring possibilities for alliance with the mysterious Fremen of the deep desert. Gurney Halleck would command military forces while working to recruit experienced spice workers whose knowledge could prove invaluable. Dr. Yue would provide medical services while studying the unique biological challenges posed by Arrakis' environment. The ceremonial aspects of departure from Caladan bore the weight of 6 centuries of tradition. The final banquet in Castle Caladan's Great Hall brought together representatives of every group that had served House Atreides loyally. Fishermen who had weathered storms under the protection of the Duke's patrol boats sat beside merchants whose enterprises had flourished under his just taxation. Craftsmen whose goods carried the reputation of Caladan quality throughout the Imperium shared tables with scholars who had found in the Duke's library resources for their research. The evening honored not just a departing Duke, but a way of life that had proven its worth across generations. The loading of guild shuttles proceeded with military precision, each item checked against manifests that Hawat had prepared with mentat thoroughness. Personal effects of the ducal family received priority placement, followed by essential equipment for planetary administration, then military supplies necessary for the establishment of security in their new domain. The Duke's personal collection of books, works of history, philosophy, and literature that had shaped his understanding of leadership, occupied specially prepared containers designed to protect them against the environmental hazards they would face. As the final shuttle departed Caladan's surface, bearing the last elements of the Atreides household toward their rendezvous with the Guild Highliner waiting in orbit, Duke Leto allowed himself one final look at the world his family had called home for 20 generations. The coastline stretched away beneath scattered clouds, its familiar contours marking the boundaries of a realm where his word had been law, his protection freely given, his justice administered with the wisdom accumulated across centuries of thoughtful governance. He understood that he might never see these shores again, never again walk the corridors of Castle Caladan, never again feel the salt wind that had blessed his family's domain since before the Guild Wars reshaped the galaxy. The arrival protocols at Arrakis demanded careful attention to imperial ceremony while establishing the legitimacy of Atreides' rule in the eyes of the planet's existing population. The transport ship's landing at the ancient control field outside the city proceeded under the observation of multiple interest groups, representatives of the minor houses that controlled interior trade networks, officials of the Spacing Guild ensuring uninterrupted spice flow, agents of SHOM monitoring the commercial implications of the transition, and scattered groups of common citizens curious about their new rulers. The Duke's first official act upon setting foot on Arrakeen soil embodied the principles that had guided Atreides' governance for generations. Rather than proceeding immediately to the formal ceremonies that would mark his installation, he ordered the posting of notices throughout the city announcing new policies designed to improve conditions for ordinary citizens. These proclamations promised fair taxation, impartial justice, protection for legitimate commerce, and opportunity for direct petition to the ducal presence. Such gestures might seem minor to those accustomed to the harsh rule that had characterized the Harkonnen years, but they signaled to perceptive observers that fundamental changes in planetary administration lay ahead. The procession from landing field to the ancient government mansion followed routes that displayed both the dignity of legitimate authority and the accessibility that marked Atreides' leadership style. Unlike the heavily armored convoys that had characterized Harkonnen movements through the city, the Duke's party moved with modest but adequate security, allowing citizens to observe their new rulers without the barriers that fear and guilt had required during the previous regime. This calculated demonstration of confidence served multiple purposes. It established the Duke's authority through display of his willingness to trust his subjects, while simultaneously gathering intelligence about the mood and condition of the population he now governed. The quiet truth that bound House Atreides together through every trial lay not in the accident of bloodline or the privileges of rank, but in the understanding that genuine strength travels with the character of those who wield it. A house's power could never be measured merely in terms of the worlds it controlled or the wealth it commanded, but in the loyalty it inspired, the discipline it maintained, and the stewardship it provided. These qualities, intangible yet decisive, would accompany Duke Leto and his people wherever necessity might lead them, whether to palace or desert, triumph or catastrophe. The lessons learned through 20 generations of Caladan governance had prepared House Atreides for challenges that could not be anticipated through conventional military or political preparation. They had learned that trust earned through consistent justice proved more reliable than obedience extracted through fear. They had discovered that disciplined restraint in the exercise of power strengthened rather than weakened authority. They had found that alliances based on mutual benefit lasted longer than relationships founded on domination or exploitation. These principles would face their ultimate test in the harsh environment of Arrakis, where the margin for error remained narrow and the consequences of failure extended far beyond personal disappointment. Yet the Duke approached this trial with confidence, rooted not in naive optimism, but in proven understanding of how human nature responded to leadership that honored both strength and mercy. Whatever challenges lay ahead, House Atreides would meet them with the accumulated wisdom of a bloodline that had never forgotten the difference between ruling and governing. Standing at the threshold between past and future, Duke Leto Atreides embodied the heritage of ocean-born restraint confronting desert obligation. The warm blue waters of Caladan had taught his house the patient strength of tides that shape coastlines through centuries of gentle pressure. The green forests and fertile shores had shown them how life flourished under protection rather than exploitation. These lessons would now face examination in a realm where water represented the difference between existence and extinction, where every decision carried the weight of survival itself. The transition from Caladan to Arrakis marked more than a change of venue. It represented the moment when theoretical understanding would meet practical application under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. The governance principles that had proven themselves effective in a forgiving environment would now demonstrate whether they could adapt to conditions that offered no forgiveness for error or weakness. The bonds of loyalty that had developed during prosperous times would discover their true strength when tested by hardship and danger. Yet this transformation held within it the seeds of something greater than mere survival. The fusion of Atreides tradition with Arrakeen reality would produce innovations in leadership, strategy, and human understanding that would ultimately reshape the political landscape of the entire Imperium. The Duke who departed Caladan as the master of an ocean world would emerge from the desert trials as something far more significant. The father of a legend whose influence would span millennia. Thus did House Atreides complete the first movement, in a symphony that would transform the known universe. The sea winds of Caladan carried their blessing across the void to where new challenges waited beneath alien stars. The red hawk banner that had watched over generations of just rule now unfurled in desert air, unchanged in its essential nature, yet ready to discover what new meanings it might acquire in a realm where tradition would meet innovation, where ancient wisdom would confront unprecedented trials. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, between the last echo of Caladan's waves and the first whisper of Arrakeen wind, lay the moment when possibilities crystallized into destiny. The careful preparation was complete, the loyal circle assembled, the terms of duty accepted with clear understanding of their weight. What remained was the eternal test that awaited every noble house, whether the principles they claimed to honor would prove strong enough to survive the crucible of absolute trial. The ocean remembers its children, even when they walk in waterless places. The hawk's flight path remains true, whether over blue waters or golden sand, and in the careful balance between what was cherished and what must be embraced, House Atreides moved forward into legend.